Hey, welcome back to the Supreme Court out with a new ruling siding with the National Rifle Association. The NRA had claimed that New York State officials illegally pressured companies to end its ties with the organization. So let's bring in my guest tonight. Brian Knight's an attorney and senior research fellow at the Mercatus Center. He filed a brief in the case, and he's up late with me tonight on the Final Five to talk about that. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
What was striking about this is that this is not something that many Supreme Court cases have been decided upon with these ideological lines. This was a pretty big victory for the NRA right across the court.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's telling is you had the ACLU representing the NRA, and both sides acknowledge that they disagree on a lot, but what they do agree on is the First Amendment. And you had broad consensus on the court, a 9-0 opinion, that if what the New York regulator is alleged to have done actually occurred, that would be, or at least could be, a violation of the First Amendment. And so, you know, if you're looking for, I guess, for a feel-good story in our polarized times, maybe this is it.
And just so people, if you're not familiar at home with what went down here, basically in the wake of some high-profile tragic events involving guns, there was this alleged regulator, or this regulator in New York allegedly wrote these letters to organizations saying, cut your ties to the NRA for one reason or another. What would have theoretically been in it for New York State by doing that?
Well, I think the argument goes that Maria Vullo, the head of the NYDFS, and Andrew Cuomo, who was at the time the governor, were trying to target the NRA because they disagreed politically, and also, I mean, there may be, or disagreed on policy grounds, but also that there may have been some political element to it. I mean, taking down the NRA could be quite the coup. And then there are allegations that Vullo explicitly in meetings with insurance companies said that she wanted to use her power as the financial regulator to affect gun policy.
So clearly this happened during a time where the NRA found itself in turmoil, not just because of what was happening in the headlines, but because there were some internal things that were unrelated to this case here. What do we take from this with the state of the court the way it is, but as we move forward, does this set any precedent? Was this something narrow that we would just see affected by the by New York and the NRA, or could this be applied elsewhere?
So I think this opinion will have implications elsewhere in areas where regulators are potentially trying to use their regulatory authority in one area to affect downstream activities. Because what's important to note here is it isn't a bank or an insurance company that sued the NYDFS. It's the NRA suing the NYDFS saying, you are trying to hurt us through your regulatory activity. And so there are other cases before the court right now, the social media cases where there may be implications, or in other areas where you may see regulators, arguably at least, trying to, say, affect environmental policy through financial regulation or something like that. There may be, this case may loom here. Now, of course, this case is a First Amendment case, and it was decided on First Amendment grounds. So how far this might, or how far this might go beyond the First Amendment context remains to be seen. You know,
and I'm glad you mentioned that, just about this whole First Amendment argument, because there's so much in our discourse and so much in our society right now where people drill it down to free speech grounds under the First Amendment. But in cases like this is exactly what it seems our founding fathers have intended, where this is they intended to prevent, where this is the government in many of these cases punishing people for protected speech, which is afforded to them in the Constitution.
Well, I think that's why you had a 9-0 opinion. Yeah. Is that, well, one, I mean, at least the allegations are pretty blatant, right? Sure. There's not a lot of subtlety to the NYDFS's alleged actions, but also I think there's broad concern across the spectrum at the court that if this were to be allowed to stand, if this type of conduct was okay, it could allow the government to do indirectly what it's not allowed to do directly. And in fact, Sotomayor, in her opinion, explicitly says you can't do that. So I think that's what drove the 9-0 decision here.
Well, there you go. Brian Knight from the Mercatus Center. Brian, thanks a lot for the insight on this one. Again, it was something with all the headlines this week, it is easy to forget that this happened. So I'm glad we're having this conversation here on the show. Good to see you.